Welcome to Chapter 12, the final chapter for Management Information Systems. This is exciting, so this is going to be it. Um, let's get to it. This is Information Security Management. This, in subsequent editions of the book, has been moved to the front of the course because of its importance. This is very important content. And I'll speak to personal issues with this that have impacted my life professionally. So here are the study questions we're going to go over. I'm not going to read all these. The essence of this chapter is how to secure your company or the company you work for from threats. So what is the goal of information systems? Well, we have threats, vulnerabilities, safeguards, and targets, and our job is to protect our targets. A target is an asset that's desired by a threat. A threat is a person or group that wants to get data or assets without the permission of the owner. Either the owner doesn't know, or they do know, but the threat doesn't care and they just go for it. A vulnerability is an opportunity for the threats. Think of a vulnerability like an unlocked door. That makes you vulnerable for it. Examples: when you buy online, you provide your credit card data. As it's transmitted over the internet, it's vulnerable to threats. That's a vulnerability. Anytime you make a purchase, that represents vulnerability. A safeguard is measures that groups take to block the threats from getting the asset. So the goal of information securities is to protect your assets. Examples of threats and loss: Xbox Live gamer wants your credit card. So you use your credit card to buy something online, that's a vulnerability. You send your credit card data to a friend in an email. I did this in Sam's Club. I was ordering Monocle's Pizza over the phone, and I was paying online, and they asked for my credit card number, and I gave it to them. But I knew as I was doing it, anybody within earshot who knew what I was doing could figure out I was giving my credit card data, and they could just write it down. That was very dumb of me, but I did it. A safeguard to buying your credit card online is only use HTTPS, which is secure browsing. You'll see that in the URL. The safeguard to sending your credit card data to a friend in an email. There is no safeguard. Just don't do that. And an employee could post sensitive data to a Google Plus group. Why is it vulnerable? Well, it's public access, and it's your company's data out there. Safeguard is passwords, procedures, and employee training, so employees know not to do that. When I was teaching at Lincoln College in the AID program for quantitative analysis, there were times when I would have students from State Farm or Country Insurance who would share very trade secret data, and I would have to warn them, like, hey, don't do that because that is a vulnerability. People are always listening, and someone could exploit that. Sources of threats. You have human error. There's three categories, three big categories: human error, computer crime, and natural disasters. And we'll talk a little bit more about these. Like human error could be an employee misunderstands operating procedures. An employee inadvertently installs an old database on top of a current one without doing backup. I have done that like a dozen times at State Farm. I've done that at Heartland. So, yeah, that's a waste. That wastes resources. Or physical accidents. If you drive a forklift through the wall of a computer room, I mean that's an oopsie. That's not a good thing. That's a human error threat. Computer crime, intentional destruction or theft of data or other system components. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then natural disasters: fires, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunamis, avalanches, other acts of nature, anything that hurts the enterprise. At State Farm, we had all our servers in-house, and at one point they were all stored in Texas, and the question was brought up: what happens if a tornado hits this data center? And nobody in Bloomington had thought of that. Um, and this was like a decade ago, but that was a pretty eye-opening question, and it seemed like a dumb question at the time. Um, but they ended up still doing their servers in house, but having it in three different locations, and now they're going to the cloud, so it's redundant. That's Amazon's problem now. But natural disasters are definitely something you need to think about. What types of security loss exist? Unauthorized data disclosure, pretexting, phishing, spoofing, drive-by sniffers, hacking, natural disasters. Um, the ones, let's see, like spoofing. Okay, IP spoofing. That's you create a fake website that looks like a real one. Email spoofing. If you've ever gotten an email from PayPal, like a fake PayPal, saying like, "Hey, we need to review um, your account," and it looks real and it looks like PayPal and it asks for your password, don't do it. You'll see this on Facebook Messenger where they'll say, "Hey, I saw a video of you. Click here. Oh, you need to update your Facebook Messenger to see the video," and then you download malware. Um, not good. Not good. Drive-by sniffers. That's people you could go. You could go to a parking lot of a company and sit there with a sniffer and get onto their Wi-Fi. Hacking. You just kind of brute force your way into somebody's system and delete stuff. You could do ransomware once you steal all the data and hold it. And natural disasters. We've talked about that. Incorrect data modification. So this is people can do this. I've done this at the companies I've worked for, not on purpose. I just messed up. If I don't follow procedures because it takes a long time and I want shortcuts, well, that'll cause problems. If you when I worked at Target, this is something that people would do, cashiers could do, increasing a customer's discount on purpose. Um, you got your little snot-nosed friends coming in. They're 16 and you're 16, and you give them like a cop discount of 15%. Um, yeah, that's not cool. Or if you modify an employee's salary, if you're working payroll, not great. That could be on purpose or not. Either way, it costs the company money. Placing incorrect data on a company website. If you mess up the date range of a sale or the date range of an event, that's not good. Improper internal controls on system errors, faulty recovery actions after disaster. Yeah, if there's a disaster and you only partially recover the data, um, that could be even worse than not doing it at all. Um, so let's talk about faulty service, incorrect data modification, um, systems not working correctly, procedural mistakes, programming errors. These are things that are structural problems with the service. IT installation errors, if you have firmware that doesn't match. We run into this at the guard base all the time. When I was on the radio troop, now I'm the commissioned officer, so I don't do that anymore. But um, when I was the radio troop, you have these radios and missions and software packages, but if you don't update the firmware on your radios, or if you update to the current one and the software doesn't work with the current one, you have to go one back. Well, you get to a mission, you're all the way in Pennsylvania, far away from your home base in Peoria, Illinois. You're in Pennsylvania, you have all this firmware that doesn't work. You have to figure out how to make it work, and you've got some army puke standing over there mad at you because your stuff's not working. It's just not great. You have to be very you have to create a checklist to make sure you have things work right. So faulty service is a huge problem. Denial of service unintentional. You could fat finger some SQL code and then you're just doing a query that's iterating over and over and over again and it crashes your site. That could be unintentional, or you could do it intentionally. You could have hackers that write scripts that all they do is just ping a website, and if you get 50,000 hackers to just all they do is ping a website over and over again, that could bring down the website. Loss of infrastructure. Oh, you know what? I have not been bringing my slides over. One second here. So this is slide 8. All right, sorry about that. I just had to yell at my kids. Where was I? So here are the answers to the study guide. Kind of a crazy day today. Slide 3, threat, vulnerability, safeguard, target. Slide 5, sources of threats. Feel free to pause this video so you can record these. And then slide 8, faulty service, usurpation. That's when they replace legitimate programs with fake copies, and so they're just absorbing all that data instead of your company getting it. And then denial of service and denial of service attacks. Let me move this back over. I will do each slide in sync now. Okay. So, number 9, loss of infrastructure. Talked about this. Advanced persistent threat, I did not talk about. Sophisticated, possibly long-running computer hack perpetrated by organizations like governments. We do that. The United States government does that. Part of my job now, my new job, my officer role is I'm a cyber officer, and so I have to learn the offensive and counter-offensive cyber warfare strategies. And it is just insane what companies can do, or what countries can do. North Korea, they had that Sony hack in 2012, I think. I mean, this is happening, and China's doing this with companies. They're getting intellectual property, both through government structure, but also hackers doing it. It's a scary world, but let me bring this over here. Slide 9. All right. So I wanted to. They had some examples in the slides. I wanted to get examples that I liked. So in 2019, Russian associated actors probed the networks of U.S. and Canadian electric utilities. That's just one example. China's doing this. North Korea's doing this. Like we're doing it to other countries. We had Stuxnet, which we did to Iran, where we blew up their centrifuges. The things that spin around. That's actually from slide 9, but we have Stuxnet and Flame. Stuxnet, we messed up their nuclear program by causing their things to spin around until they crashed. We completely blew up their lab virtually. And then Flame was capturing screen images, email, text, using just Bluetooth communication. Pretty crazy stuff. And then another example, I had the extra credit opportunity for you to do, and it's still available for you to read about and then respond to. I said extra credit video, but it's not a video. So there was ransomware, and they probably know how they got in, but they're not telling it to the employees. But some group got into Heartland's database and took out a ton of servers and held up the data for ransomware. Heartland was smart. We had the data back up, and then we systematically brought the systems back up, so we did not pay the ransom. But this took me, I was unable to work for like a month, and this is when people were enrolling in classes. And then people's personal data did get stolen, so not great. Another thing, for me, this is a human threat. For my security clearance at the base, I have a top secret security clearance, so they have The FBI comes in and they ask my neighbors, my coworkers, my family. Um, they ask, "Hey, what's going on with Andy Huey? Is there any way that a foreign enemy could exploit his addiction? Is he addicted to anything? Is he having an affair? Is anything going on that they could get a hold of and say, you need to, Andy, get this data for us, and we won't release this information publicly." Um, Anyone in the military with a secure or with a secret or top secret clearance has to go through that. How big of a problem is it? Well, world economies by size, the U.S. to China. If cybercrime was a world economy, it would be the number 3 economy in the world, ahead of Japan. Um, so expected 2015, $3 trillion was the cost of cybercrime. 2021, it'll be $6 trillion. 2025, it'll be $10.5 trillion. That is a huge problem. It's more profitable than the global drug trade. Um, Costs more per year than all natural disasters. So that's great. Um, Pretty optimistic or pessimistic view of the future. So what can you do? What are some strategies companies can make? Intrusion detection system, a computer program that senses when another computer is attempting to access the computer. And yeah, that it is just it is insane what people try to get away with. People will just try anything because it costs nothing to try to intrude into somebody's computer. If you're in Singapore and you just decide to do that, and they catch it. No, you're not going to get in trouble. Nothing bad's going to happen. You just didn't get in, so you might as well try as many computers as you can, just over and over, like a brute force strategy. So you have to set yourself up for that because you're going to be under constant attack. Your data is valuable. How should you respond? Take security seriously. Passwords. Use multiple passwords. Because if you use the same password among different platforms, once that gets leaked once, those hackers are going to try all these different websites. They're just going to try 1,000 websites, and maybe you use 20 of them. And on that 20, if you use that password, well, bingo bango, they've got your password for those 20 sites. So use different passwords on different sites. Don't send valuable data via email or IM. Clear your browsing history. Update your antivirus software. Uh, Follow your organizational security directives. If you just follow the directives of your IT department, you're going to be good. How should organizations respond to security threats? So, a company-wide security policy, you decide what data to store, how long to store it, the process to store the data, what data you're going to share with organizations, how employees can obtain copies of data stored about them. In the research department at Heartland, we've run into an issue where we had access to a production database, meaning live data, um, and that's run by PeopleSoft. And the PeopleSoft person at Heartland didn't know that we had access to live production or prod data, and so they worked to give us a snapshot, like just with temp tables, so we couldn't mess up the live prod data, which is a good thing because I don't want access to prod data because I could mess stuff up. That was an organizational change that was made to make the data more secure. Let's see here. How employees can request changes to inaccurate data. What employees can do with their own mobile devices, because that's a big vulnerability. Mobile devices, and what you can do with employee-owned equipment off 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 work hours. And this is a huge thing. Think of all the people at State Farm or whatever company that have work-issued laptops that are working from home now. Well, they're probably going to use that to browse the internet and fart around on Facebook or whatever they're going to do. So that this is a huge vulnerability as well. Slide 16. The security safeguards. There's 5 IS components: hardware, software, data, procedures, people. So this is back to like week 1, week 3 stuff. Um, what are the three safeguards? Technical, data, human. So I'm not going to read all these, but these are the things that you can do to support these safeguards. Um, if you work in a company, you're going to get training on IT. It's going to be mandatory. It's probably going to be something that you click through without really paying attention to it. Um, but that's guaranteed. All these things you're going to be guaranteed to see. Let me bring this over. All right. So how can technical safeguards protect against security threats? You can encrypt the data, so there's a cipher key that you apply to it on one end, and then at the other end you can decode it. You can use firewalls to make sure bad programs don't get through, and that you have a clear network, insulated or segregated from this nasty, uh, dirty internet. Malware protection, and you can design applications to be secure. HTTPS, if you're using a browser, if you're entering your credit card data onto a website without HTTPS, you're pretty much guaranteeing your credit card's going to get stolen. So this has been around for a while. This is time tested. You're cipher encrypting your credit card information that only the website um, can interpret. Firewalls. So there's multiple firewalls that companies use. You have a perimeter firewall, which is like the closest. It's the closest thing to the internet. So this is your big daddy here. This is gonna do most of the heavy lifting for you. But then you have an internal firewall um, as well, and there are a couple of different firewalls that you can use within there. One of them is a packet filtering firewall. So that examines each part of a message and determines whether to let it pass. So it looks at where it's coming from, it looks at where it's going, and it looks at other data. It looks at patterns of data that it knows are known threats. They push out updates to the firewalls regularly to update it for these bad pattern threats that it can find. Um, and that's going to help you, and that's going to help your business keep the network safe. Those are firewalls. Slide 20. If something gets through, viruses, there's a payload, which is the program code that causes the unwarranted activity. If that payload gets through, bam, big problems. And then there's beacons. If you read about like the dark web or the deep web, um, you're still not anonymous there, because websites can find out things like where you're viewing from. They can see what your monitor resolution is, what operating system you're on, what browser version you're on. They can detect what hardware is plugged into your computer. They can detect all of those things, and they can create a profile for you. And so even if you're on the deep web, you're on a Tor server, you're anonymous, you're doing private browsing, all of that stuff, they can still find out who you are in many cases because of beacons, which are files that gather demographic information, and they can profile you. Facebook can know your interests even if you browse things off of Facebook because of things like beacon files, which is legal, but are these for slide 20. Um, so pretty crazy. And you can detect these problems with slow system startup, sluggish performance. If you have a bunch of pop-up ads, I mean, if you have pop-up ads in the year 2020, then something seriously has gone wrong with your computer. Suspicious homepage changes, unusual hard disk activity, um, Yeah, get your stuff cleaned and fixed. Safeguards, anti-spyware programs, antivirus, scan that frequently. Update your definitions. These get pushed regularly, so take advantage of that. Only open email attachments from known sources. Heartland has added something to show when an email comes from an outside source. State Farm did that as well, and they made an easy report phishing button. Install software updates. Browse only reputable internet neighborhoods. Yeah, that for sure. If you download a virus, people are gonna know you're visiting websites you shouldn't visit. SQL or SQL injection attacks. You don't really see these anymore because people have come up with ways to write SQL code to prevent it. Um, but people still try it. Why not? Like with the example before, it costs nothing to try it. Might as well go for it. Throw it against the wall and see what sticks. SQL injection attack. You can write code. Um, if there's a form that uses SQL on a web page, you would write SQL code that says select all from table, and you can guess at what table name is, or there's ways you can find it out, and you can drop a SQL code. You can drop 100 lines of SQL code into a form and actually get the result that you want. Um, Pretty nuts, pretty insane, but it's less of a threat now. Um, so how can you use data safeguards to protect? Well, define your data policies, um, data rights and responsibilities. Encrypt your data. Back up your stuff in case it gets stolen. Heartland did a good job of this. Physical security. Uh, Physical security, that someone could walk up to your computer and just log in and steal your crap. Or if you leave it logged in, just walk up and email it to themselves or use a thumb drive. Um, how can humans do this? Hiring and screening. This is why the security clearance process is so detailed at the Air Force. Um, Position definition. Define who does what. Um, Termination of people who don't follow the rules. Um, yeah, human safeguards. Account administration. You could force users to change their passwords. I do the dumb thing and just add the letter one, or or the number, the letter one. I keep adding numbers to the end of my password. That's a pretty dumb strategy, but that's what I do. Um, you could come up with ways to every 6 months, every 3 months, change your password. Um, you could have an acknowledgement form. Um, Even if people don't even read this, it does modify behavior a little bit. It does plant that seed in their head that I gotta take this seriously. There are systems procedures. This is talking about backup recovery and normal operation strategies. Talking about appropriate use of the systems. Um, and then how can organizations respond to security incidents? Have a plan in place so you're not caught flat-footed. Have centralized reporting. Have one like czar in charge of it. In Heartland's case, we had Scott Bross, the IT vice president. He was the czar of the response process. Specific response speed, preparation pays. It pays to be ready for it, and don't make the problem worse. And then practice it. Finally, how does this knowledge help you? Well, it'll keep you aware of threats to computer security. Know the trade-offs. Um, you can spend $1 million creating an ultra safe system. Um, but can you do that if you're a small business? How do you do reasonable risk mitigation for your budget? Ways to protect your devices. Um, Understand how organizations should respond to security incidents. That'll help if you do the Heartland. If you look at the Heartland extra credit case, that will help you with that a lot. In the assignment for this chapter is on the music industry ransomware attacks. See what happened and then look at Radiohead's response. Um, But that is it for Chapter 12 and MIS.